Hi, welcome again to a short video where we discuss the different questions which has been posed by the community to clarify this project on read circles on real estate, onboarding, and later on lending. So today we go through some of the operational topics, questions, right? And we'll try to do it in the verbose way that we have tried earlier. So let's get started. So, how will REIT circles provide legal rights to the real world asset, right? So, as I explained in the last video as well, every asset on REIT circles, when it is onboarded and created an NFT out of it, just like we are going on from left side to the right side, that we are digitizing the property. Now, at the same time, when we have to do lending, we have to also connect it to the real world. And the way we do it, again, I repeat, is that we create real world legal entities because they are the representation of all real world stuff that we do, especially financial stuff. It always starts with a legal contract. And hence, we have a legal entity in the real world that will always hold the right of access to the real world asset. So some of the ways you do it is that you will be having a trust, and every time an asset is onboarded, it can be entrusted to the trust to kind of have a beneficiaries list, and the beneficiaries can be indirect or direct. Indirect beneficiaries, for example, can be a DAO, which is a smart contract which distributes any kind of profits to the different investors, right? So this kind of uses the blockchain technology in order to automate many of the functions that in real world have to be done manually and go through banking system. And here it can be tokenized and the profits can be distributed to the real world actors. So when they say that how do you provide the legal rights? The legal rights actually come because there is a trust holding the asset, and the trust can distribute it to this DAO, which is also a real world legal entity. So whenever you're part of this legal entity, then you're entitled to some of the benefits that legal entity brings, distribution of profits, holding the assets, which actually brings in the profits, and so on, right? So when you sign in and become a part of the DAO will have an agreement, a legal agreement, which you will sign. And by signing that legal agreement, or you basically become part of the DAO. And once you become part of the DAO, then all the DAO protections are also provided to all the investors, right? And the asset, indirectly in this case, the digital counterpart of the asset, is actually absorbed inside the DAO. So there will be smart contracts which locks in this NFT, for example, right? So the whenever the person who is lending his asset, lending against his asset, it means that he's locking his NFT into a smart contract, and that smart contract belongs to the DAO, right? And then moment you lock in, then he doesn't have access to the NFT, right? And the NFT always has informations linking these legal contracts. So whenever a legal contract happens in the real world, they will always be tied to the data of the NFT. So there is no way that the person can say that, okay, this asset does not get tied up, because the data on the blockchain will reflect the real world tie up with the contracts. Yes, so the contracts will be part of the NFT data, and whenever you lock in the NFT, he loses access because he's lending against it, and he can of course release it by paying back the money. But at the same time, all the data are interconnected. So once you interconnect the data, especially using blockchain technology, it is very hard for anybody to kind of defraud based on that, right? Okay, second question. How will read circles verify the identity of the legal persons reviewing and approving the legal document? So this is a quite an important question because this is at the root of it, right? So let's look at the verification chain that we are trying to build. So root of trust. There's the concept of root of trust, right? So whom do we trust at the beginning, right? And this filters down. Essentially, you can say that the root of trust is with the government identities issued by the government and the institutions which are in the government, which are spun up by the government. Say, for example, you have the university, right, which has affiliations to the national governments. Then you have, for example, institutions, other institutions, right? And they can be many things. They can be legal institutions, right? They can be notary institutions. They can be real estate institutions, and so on, right? National level, who basically certifies that a person is who he claims to be, right? So if I have passed out of a university, they provide me a certificate. If I passed over institutions, probably I also have some kind of certificate to show later on that actually I did that thing, right? So these are the real world, these are called the root of trust. Yes. Now, they are very distributed, so there could be many of them and they can vary per country, right? So these institutions could be many. Yeah. And now the thing is that they issue all paper certificates. So again, coming back to the concept of documents, right? They all of them issue some sort of paper documents, right? You have your own certificates, which are all in um, anywhere you go get qualified, they will probably issue a paper, um, and that is the proof that you have done something, right? So these are the papers. Now, normally, till all these things become digitized, we have to work along with, and I believe that digitization, where everything is issued as a digital counterpart and so-called verifiable credentials, right? So if you think of this, verifiable credentials is the digital counterpart of it. Now, yes, we were coming to a times in EU also, there are regulations being made where all certificates will be issued in some kind of verifiable credentials format, right? So if verifiable credentials format is given out by all these institutions, then our work on verification side becomes much easier than we have to do it right now. Yes. But till that point, and especially if you have to create a globally scalable system, you can imagine that many of the backward countries already does not even have the paper set correctly. There are lots of frauds and other things, right? And hence just the paper does not help. And till we have a truly let's say a unified system with verifiable credentials and all the infrastructure to verify it, like the because every time you issue a verifiable credentials, it also means that that cannot stand on its own. You also need these institutions or on a country level to roll out some infrastructure through which we can actually verify these verifiable credentials. They needs to be verified, right? um, Issuing and verification, those are two important things. And normally what happens is that you can have a self-verified credentials, means there is a signature, for example, which can be verified, but then the verification key, the private key, for example, is most of the time in the root of trust or anything related to the root of the trust. So you can just go and fetch that key and then verify, okay, this document was issued by these institutions because I can match up the signature with the keys that were published from these institutions, right? That's how it works out. Now, till we reach that point, so we are in phase, let's say phase one the of the paper-based economy, phase A, you can call it, and we want to transition to phase B later on, which is a much more advanced phase, right? And this requires cooperation from the government. But till we have that, these papers needs to be actually verified. And that's why we in the read circles, for example, have to create that layer, that layering of verification layering, so where we have to employ real world people in order to verify these documents. And those real world people, they themselves needs to be certified, means they have to give their credentials, right? And these credentials have to be verified. Now, where do you start? So our goal is that initially we will start off with another setting up, let's say, a different entity who will be helping us. We cannot be ourselves issuing those certificates on behalf of people. So if there are, say, people who are working as verifiers, right? People who are acting as verifiers on this platform, so they are verifiers. We will have an issuer app which will be created for this purpose. So we will have an app, right? So um, and this app essentially will be used by the verifiers to verify themselves. Yes. And the documents for this app will be the ones which are coming from here. So all the documents that they have submitted from the what they have got as credentials for their personal, let's say, qualifications, they will be using this app to upload these documents, for example, right? And the issuer app will be a third party app who will be later on certified to issue this sort of creation of the verifiable credentials, which was done by the government. But essentially, we will be working towards creating an app which can issue such a verifiable credentials. So this verifiable, so at the end, what happens is that in this app, the input is data of the certificates, and out comes the verifiable credentials. And this is a third party app that will be that will be created by us. Yes. And it will be a separate legal institutions. It cannot be ourselves, and it will vary from country to country, right? So this part totally will be a separate legal entity, and it will vary from country to country. Yes, this one, right? And so this ecosystem will take a little bit of time, but essentially, since we are using, let's say, we are trying to use, therefore, some of the technologies being built inside Cardano at Prism, for example, and that will lead to some kind of decentralized verification. And finally, it will also aggregate different players and create some sort of root of trust using this, right? And later on, if the root of trust shifts to the government, that government starts issuing that, then we can easily plug in that inside the issuer app. Our work reduces, the things become much easier and better, and we are directly able to use the verifiable credentials of the issuers. And we are creating two layers. So essentially, there will be a layer of moderators, um, and then there will be a layer of verifiers who has to um, um, submit their personal credentials, real world credentials, right? And then if there is any kind of dispute or anything else, then moderators have to kick in order to resolve that topic. So we'll have the role of moderators, and we'll have the role of normal verifiers per country. And depending on the role, it can be a verifier, can be a legal person, they can be a real estate guy, they can be other roles over time. But essentially, this is kind of digitizing the entire process in real world as it happens right now, but doing it in a much more verifiable way and much more smoother digital way of verifying the whole part. Yeah, so that, I hope, answers a little bit of the questions, right? So how will read circles verify the identity? So we'll have an issuer app. Issuer app will issue verifiable credentials, and that will be used by the verification platform in order to give the right to work on the verification platform. And hence, it is kind of a new economy being generated, that people are able to work digitally online, verify their own credentials, and actually get paid for the work done online in an entirely automated way. Yeah. And finally, what ends up is that all these, let's say, the verifiers and the moderators, they will be in the marketplace. So this is where the decentralized marketplace for verification comes into the picture. And so this will be the decentralized marketplace you can think of. Yes. So, okay. So I hope that answers the question. Then we move on to the next question. Will the house be used as collateral, or will read circles get the rights to own a share of the house? So these are two different products. I think we also mentioned in our white paper. The part we will start off is a very simple one. We are going to start off with the lending against the NFT. Yes, lending against verified real estate, right? So we have built a real world verification platform for a reason, because whenever you do lending, much of the data will not be on the chain. And then it becomes very hard for anybody investing to actually gain that real world data. And there can be a lot of forgery and other things, right? And hence, lending against a verified real estate versus lending against just a normal NFT, lending against a normal NFT is is a big difference. And especially, it doesn't give the investor the confidence. This one, it does not give the investor the confidence, while this one actually is a green, because this is where all the data you have on chain. Um, Nothing is 100% robust, but at least the confidence level from here to here increases drastically, right? Confidence boost, right? So you get a real boost if you actually put the data against in the chain, and everything can be verified on chain, which is the goal of read circles. And we start with a lending product. Yeah, we do not start initially with the fractionalization, because that's a concept which is there in the real world, but it will take some time before we can deal with fractional real estates. So we first start off with a lending product, because we already have the NFT, right? We already have the NFT, which is created as an byproduct of the verification, right? So the NFT, and the NFT can directly now access be used for lending itself, right? So you can lock in the NFT, and then after that you can create financial instruments for lending, right? And so it will be kind of a bond where you borrow against your asset initially, and then the whole process, the way this spills over into equity, we have explained it in detail in our white paper, is that if there is any kind of default on lending, right? And since you're lending against your asset, a real world asset, right? So, so if you're lending against your real world asset, right? And effectively, this NFT is a representation, and you log that in. Now, if there is a default case, then what happens is this collateral has to be used, right? So it's one of the most safest way of lending against, because there is something in the real world which exists, and you can take possession of that, right? So this is the real world uh, uh, counterpart, and against that you are doing the lending. So normally in the banks and all, what they do is they take away the papers, and then they have their own centralized database through which they kind of monitor what's happening with the lending part, and the condition of the real world asset, right? So the best we can do in the digital world is that we have done the verification, we have done the lock-in of the real world asset via the NFT lock-in, and then finally the lending part, we borrow against a common pool. Let's say we create a monetary pool here, some sort of crowdfunding, right? and that will be handled by the DAO. So moment the DAO is created, people can invest via the DAO. So this is the DAO, which which pools assets together for investments, right? And against this pool of asset, you are doing the lending. So the DAO, the assets that are built up inside the DAO, can be used for lending purposes, right? And once you do that, then the benefits of the lending, let's say the interest charged to the user who is actually taking the lending, will filter out to the DAO, and the DAO can distribute it to all the other members who are part of the DAO, right? Right. So this is how it will work, and this is the, let's say, the first financial instruments that we will be creating after the verification process is over. We'll be doing a lending, and then if there is a default, then that can spill over into fractionalization. Why? Because this is the collateral. So if there is a risk of, let's say, 10% default against this asset, then actually what you can do is you can fractionalize it into tokens, right? So then what you can do is, in order to spread out the risk, then you can say, okay, if there is a default case, then that's a separate process where we can then fractionalize and spread the risk to the, give the tokens to the investors. The NFT stays locked in, a fractionalization happens in an automated manner, and then the coins are distributed to the people who are part of the DAO, for example, right? Because they are the ones who have invested, and then finally the tokens go back to the investors. And then this tokenization process, or the fractionalization process, is a pure outcome of the lending part. So it spills over into that one instead of and the other part is that you first fractionalize and then distribute the equity, but that will be a much more, let's say, legally more complex. And so therefore we will start with the lending platform as the first instrument. Okay, next question. How will REIT circles verify the correctness of the legal documents that are provided by the house owners? Well, um, so essentially, what can happen is that once you get the documents, there are two ways you can do that. You have legal persons, so they will be onboarded, right? So their real world job is to verify the documents on behalf of banking institutions. So if you think of the verifiers who are currently doing the job, who are they? Who pays them, right? Verifiers currently are working for banks and other financial institutions, right? So currently, the verifiers are working for banks and other financial institutions, allowing them to verify the assets. So these are the same guys who will be onboarded on a platform, right? As we said, via the issuer app, and they will be doing the verification. Except they will not do it for the banks, but we replace the banks with, let's say, the DAO to which actually the assets will belong to, right? So in this case, it will be the DAO or the trust or the combined entity. Instead of that, they will be working via the Read Circles platform. And so via Read Circles platform for the DAO based funds, let's say, right? And so the question remains the same. It is verifiers working right now will be verifying. And because we are in a paper economy, I do not see right now how we are going to immediately transition to a totally non-paper economy. So we have to go through this entire verification process of the documents currently here, and it will shift to here, right? So from here, we make a transition to here. And how they make the verification, that's exactly the same way if they have to fetch the documents from the government and then compare it against what has been uploaded, that could be one way, right? And it could be just that they are already familiar with the entire documentation process, they know what it is. And then secondly, we also use AI to parse these documents. So we are going to introduce AI based parsing of the documents, right? AI is becoming more powerful with generative AI coming into the picture, right? With ChatGPT and other similar technologies able to learn stuff over time. So AI will be involved in this one, right? And AI, as the process matures, AI will gain more and more of that knowledge, and they can help human beings verify the documents in a much more easier manner. So things become easier from here. Yes. And the last question for today, can the asset owner recover access to the assets in case the private keys are lost? This is a much more, I think, a detailed topic. I will skip it for today because we can go into depth how the platform works, how the NFTs are issued, and what happens in case, for example, Read Circles itself disappears, right? So the one of the things that blockchain kind of promises is that ownership of the entire thing has to be with the owner of that document. So if there are people who are holding this, who are owners of the assets, the maximal ownership. So here, if there are say owners, either in form of investors or, for example, lenders, right? So on and so forth, and the verifiers, owners, and so on and so forth. All the data that belongs to each individual should be with the individual. That is kind of the goal of the Web3, that you give ownership back to the people who actually is the originator of those data, to whom actually it belongs. And right now, if you see, it's not the case, right? Banks hold your data, governments hold your data, and none of it actually belongs to you, although they are your documents. You are the source of those documents, right? And so in this case, if you think Read Circles, what it does not want to become is that it does not want to become another centralized provider. Yeah, not centralized. It does not want to become the bottleneck. It wants to provide at least a tool chain that allows you to kind of own your own data via NFT process and verifiable credentials and other things, but it does not want to hold your data. So in principle, we are kind of an engine, let's say, for decentralization. Yes, and we want to become an engine for decentralization within real estate, giving power back to the users. Yes, to the users to whom all the things belong. We do not want to become a centralized provider, but we do want to provide all the tool chain that allows people to own their own data, right? And therefore, the data is lying in the blockchain, the keys are with the owners, right? There is some part of centralization when we mint the NFT, for example, but over a period of time, we will have to check whether that can be totally decentralized or not. Because when you mint the NFTs, the data that is associated with the NFTs are actually with the owner. It's on the blockchain. It's not with us. So even if Read Circles were to disappear, so the best way you can look at it is that if Read Circles were to disappear tomorrow, what happens to your data, right? Um, Nothing happens to your data. You don't lose a single data actually, because everything is transparent. It's held by you. Yes, it's on the blockchain, and the keys are held by you. Yes, the maximum you lose is the modifiability of the data, but that you can export it to another platform, and you can start building upon that data, and nobody can stop you on doing that. Yes, so that's the power of decentralization. Without holding any data, we become an agent of change, where owners and the other actors in this ecosystem gets back the hold of their own data, and secondly, they are able to transact in a peer-to-peer manner, right? So there are two goals, which are primary, is that give ownership back to the people who actually owns the things, right? And secondly, you enable people to people transactions in the most efficient way, right? So that's a new economy which is promised by the Web3. That's what Trade Circles wants to become. So here ends the video for today. Thank you.